Welcome back, everyone. I hope you all had a good lunch break. To kick off our afternoon, we have a short but very important and interesting session on what is a generation. Gen X, Millennials, Boomers are all terms that have gained increasing popularity in research, in policy, and wider discourse. Yet it's often unclear what a generation is or how we can use the term meaningfully. Today, I am delighted to have Jennie Bristow and Dr. Helen Kingstone from the Wellcome Generations Network, of which ILC is also a member, to offer their insights on this timely discussion. Jennie Bristow is a senior lecturer in sociology at the Canterbury Christ Church University and convener along with Dr. Helen Kingstone of the Generations Network. Her research and writing focuses on intergenerational relations and narratives of generational conflict. Dr. Helen Kingstone is a research fellow at the University of Surrey. Her work examines how we write the history of our lifetimes in the 19th century and the present through literary and archival research, oral history interviewing, and digital humanities methods. Over to you, Jennie.
Thank you, Aaron. I wanted to start by just saying a little bit about the Generations Network. Helen and I set this up in 2019, different world, with funding from the Wellcome Trust, in order to interrogate the question, generations, what's in the concept and how should it be used? And what we wanted to do with the network was two things. First of all, have an interdisciplinary discussion about the meaning of the term generation. I'm a social scientist, Helen works in the humanities area, and we wanted to draw together academics from across the disciplines to try and develop a shared understanding. And we also wanted to have this discussion with organisations that work with the concept of generation, hence our involvement with ILC in this collaboration, which has been wonderful, and also British Pregnancy Advisory Service. And we've also been working with the Research Centre for Parenting Cultural Studies based at the University of Kent. So we've had 4 very constructive workshops to date, looking at different dimensions of the generation question, which Helen will talk about it in a minute, generations within families, generational identities, intergenerational relations, and also generations' relationship to historical events, which was a workshop prompted by the very current context that we're working in together. Our final discussions will be in early 2021, where we're planning to draw together the themes from our discussions into some kind of broad recommendations for the media and policymakers about how we can most constructively work with this term generation.
So the reason why we think generation is a concept worth interrogating further, really, is because it is both doing 2 things at once, basically, often used, in multiple ways at the same time. So on the one hand, as hopefully you can see on the slide coming up now, on the one hand, it's a kind of vertical or kind of chronological concept. So we've shown this on a y-axis here. And it's used to refer to family generations, grandparents, parents, children, and so on. But even this single dimension is quite fuzzy. Sometimes people use the term generations more generally and more broadly to refer to life stages. So you might hear people talking about the older generation or the younger generation in this way. And there's also another dimension, what we've represented here on the x-axis, of thinking about generations as groups of contemporaries. So the most precise usage of this refers to these broad birth date periods, such as baby boomers, Generation X, Generation Y, which also gets called millennials, and so on. But you might also hear people use the term generation to refer to narrower strata within these social dimensions. So sometimes people use the term generation to refer to really what might better be called an age group, so 60 to 65-year-olds, for example, or even more narrowly, what we could alternatively call a cohort, so something like the class of 1966 or so on. So some of the recommendations that our network has drawn together for people in the media and policymakers, as Jenny mentioned, are really to think about a few key questions before using the concept and using the term. So one would be, who are we talking about? So we'd recommend avoiding overgeneralizing about any single generation's experience. You know, often when it's talked about, a kind of stereotypical boomer or millennial, you know, is seen as white and middle class. But of course, most members of both generations don't fit these stereotypes. And of course, generational categories intersect with other categories of identity. We'd also want to think about, why are we talking about generations? So we'd recommend not leaping to generational differences as a kind of explanation at times when it might be a way of avoiding more difficult issues such as class or race or gender. It's also worth thinking about, why are we using the term generation? And more than that, who are we talking to, right? So, you know, we don't want to assume that differences between generations automatically leads to antagonism. And of course, often generational groups are interdependent. So for instance, one recommendation we would like to see more of is that to support intergenerational solidarity, stakeholder consultations could bring different generations in and bring them in together so that groups can be in dialogue and solutions can work for all. We'd love to be in touch further, so I've posted our web pages, our Twitter handle and our project email address in the chat. And we'll also be in the networking room during the next coffee break.
Thank you both. Clearly a very complex topic, and it's impressive that you've been able to explain it so succinctly in less than 10 minutes. So really, that's really great. And I think what's really clear from this discussion is it helps us think about the wider implications that the use of generations can have in the policy discussions that we have today. And I think it helps certainly frame the rest of today's sessions as well. As Helen mentioned, they both will be available to answer any of your questions about either what they presented today or also about the Generations Network at the early afternoon break. So please do get in touch with them there. And finally, I would like to remind everybody that the next session on social care is scheduled to start right after this one. Thank you very much.